All right. Again, thanks everybody for attending the webinar today. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Today's webinar is uh, titled Why Companies Using Sage 500 Are Switching to Sage Intacct. So we'll kind of get going here. Some quick introductions. On the call here, my name is Joe Gupser, and I am the partner of the Sage Software Division at Martin and Associates, and there is my contact information there. And then also on the call, who'll be chiming in probably here at various points, is Brett Penzinger. He is the director of the Sage Software Division here at Martin and Associates, and there is his contact information. If you guys want to reach out, any questions or anything afterwards, or just let us know, and we'll be happy to talk to you further. So here's a quick agenda of what we are going to cover today. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of do a Sage 500 to Sage Intacct comparison. We're going to then do an introduction to the Sage Intacct product and talk about that in a little more detail. We'll talk about the user types available in Sage Intacct, talk a little bit about what's called the Sage Intacct Learning. We'll talk about the dimensions and dashboards, some of the reporting options, the multi-entity environment. We'll discuss a thing called workflow approvals. We'll get into some AP and AR automation, and then we will also talk about some banking things as well. So here's some Sage 500 to Sage Intacct comparisons. So on the deployment model, so this is talking about how the software is kind of installed and where you access it from and things of that nature. Sage 500 is what is called an on-premise system, and that requires a dedicated server for the program to run on. And then a client needs to be installed on each workstation that will be accessing Sage 500. Okay, and that server has to be either a physical server sitting in your office or a hosted server out there somewhere that you're renting space on, but you have to have a physical hard location for that product to be installed. Where Sage Intacct is a SaaS or cloud-based ERP system, and as a result, there is not a need for a dedicated server for your Sage Intacct. And the users, they will access the Sage Intacct ERP via a web browser. So you don't have to have a really robust client workstation to access Sage Intacct. As long as you have a machine that has a web browser on it and an internet connection, you will be able to access your Sage Intacct. And Sage Intacct also includes automated data encryption, backups, access controls, and they're all maintained and monitored by Sage software. Software update frequency. This is a big difference between Sage 500 and Sage Intacct. Sage 500 releases an annual update to the program. Usually it's annually. These updates focus mainly on stability and compliance issues. What they're really trying to do is they're just trying to keep the product up and running on with the new technology for the most part, and any compliance issues that need to be addressed as well. These updates have to be manually applied to the system. And so as a result, it requires some downtime because we have to schedule the time to get the upgrades installed and tested and all that good stuff. And as I mentioned before, the updates provide limited innovation. They're mainly just tied to compliance and stability issues. And this is mainly because Sage 500 is tied to outdated legacy type of architecture. Sage Intacct, on the other hand, they receive quarterly updates to the system with new features in all of the updates. And a key point of this is all the updates are automatically applied to the system. So you'll get a note saying whoever the main contact is for your Sage Intacct would get a note saying that an update is scheduled for this particular day, and it's applied across all clients using Sage Intacct out there. You go home one day and you come in the next day and you're on a new version. So you have a reduction or elimination of your cost to perform your upgrades. That's a key difference between them. Integrations. Sage 500 integrations are usually customer third party. Sage Intacct, however, provides an open API and pre-built connectors. Some of these pre-built connectors include things like Salesforce.com and ADP integrations. Sage Intacct also has a very robust marketplace that you can access for integrations as well. And we'll talk briefly about the marketplace here in a little bit. Transaction updates. Sage 500 is what is called a batch-driven ERP. And what that means is you enter your data into a batch. Nothing hits your real-time postings until you run a journal or a register and you update that batch. So your data is not always current while you have data sitting out there in those batches. Sage Intacct is not a batch-based ERP, and as a result, will provide real-time access to your data. And we'll see a little bit of that as we're going through the system of how the postings work inside of Intacct. Another area is the reporting and the analysis area. Sage 500 provides static reports and data explorer views to see data in the system. Sage Intacct provides real-time customizable dashboards and reporting to access your data and gives you a lot more options to kind of slice and dice your data, as we'll see here in a little bit. Total cost of ownership. Sage 500 has a higher upfront cost to purchase the software because you're mainly buying the software, and then you have an ongoing annual maintenance cost starting in year 2 going forward. Plus, there's also the cost of ongoing IT maintenance because you have to maintain a server and or more robust client workstations. Sage Intacct, on the other hand, is a subscription-based ERP that requires a more limited amount of hardware like we talked about. So you have a lower total cost of ownership typically with a Sage Intacct than a Sage 500 a lot of times. Chart of accounts. Sage 500 uses the concept of natural accounts plus account segments. A GL account will need to be created for each required combination of natural accounts and sub-account or accounts that you have in the system that you want to be able to post to. Sage Intacct, on the other hand, uses the concept of natural accounts and dimensions. Dimensions replace your sub-accounts. You don't need to create all the possible combinations of those out there because transactions are just tagged to the appropriate dimensional values, and this helps reduce the amount of GL accounts that are needed to be created. Multi-entity. Sage 500, so both Sage 500 and Sage Intacct are multi-entity environments. The difference is Sage 500 companies are independent of each other. They're all like siloed in effect, where each company is its own container of data. And as a result, you have to maintain your own list of chart of accounts, vendors, customers, items, etc. for each Sage 500 company. Sage Intacct has what's called a top level that sits above all your companies or entities. And this allows multiple entities to share a chart of accounts, your vendors, your customers, your items. So you're only maintaining them in one place, and then all the companies or entities below the top level then use that those shared master files. Some additional things here. Sage Intacct helps eliminate unexpected hardware and upgrade costs like we talked about. Through automation, Sage Intacct helps shorten month-end close cycles, thus allowing your staff to focus more on data analysis and planning items. With Sage Intacct, since the quarterly upgrades are automatic, as we mentioned, there are no upgrade fees for that. Sage Intacct provides built-in workflow approvals, which require a third-party add-on to do the same functionality in Sage 500. Sage Intacct has a strong built-in audit trail tracking and reporting. And Sage Intacct, kind of what we talked about here, the shorter month-end cycles, has a quicker month-end due to the some built-in efficiencies that it has. So let's talk a little bit more in detail about Sage Intacct. So Sage Intacct is a born-in-the-cloud ERP system. The product was founded in 1999. And it was a native cloud-based product from the very first line of code. It was written as a cloud-based ERP system. It's very reliable. It has a 99.8% uptime commitment. And it also does automatic backups and things like I mentioned earlier. Because you're accessing it through a web browser, it has a more fresh and modern user interface. And also because you're accessing it through a web browser, you can access your ERP with Sage Intacct really from anywhere at any time, as long as you have an internet connection and a web browser. It uses dimensional accounting, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, and we'll get into the details of that here in a minute. Dashboards are available inside of Intacct. You can create your own dashboards. It has multi built right into it. So multi-entity, multi-bin if you're doing some inventory, multi-currency if you're in multiple, if you're dealing with multiple currencies in your ERP system, it has that functionality as well. Workflow approval process is available throughout the system. We talked about the automatic upgrades for new releases per year. Best of breed, easy integration to other solutions. That's a lot of the stuff through the marketplace and things that we talked about. It is designed for CFOs, accounting teams, professional finance teams looking for a, powerful accounting solution. And it was chosen as the first and only preferred financial management software by the AICPA. So it was the first one that got kind of, from the ICPA, and it's the only one that's still been kind of selected as the preferred option out there. A little bit more about Sage Intacct. So from startup to marketplace, as I mentioned, it started in 1999. It kind of, progressed along here. 2009, it got the AICPA endorsement that we talked about. 2017 was a big year for Sage Intacct because that is when it went from Intacct to Sage Intacct, because that's when Sage purchased the product. And from this point on, the growth of Intacct has gone up, substantially, because Sage has put a lot of investment dollars into the product to really build out the product, and they had a lot of new and neat functionality to the product over the last 8 years or so. It always does really well. #1 in customer satisfaction surveys year after year. Always scores really well out there. Here's a little bit about the Sage Intacct marketplace I mentioned. So you'll see there's different areas where you can basically have all these add-on products to add functionality to your Sage Intacct that are third-party things outside of the system. So if you do things in budgeting and planning and you don't want to use the built-in one, EDI if you have that, document management, all these things are all available out in the marketplace to add on to your Sage Intacct system. There is a thing called Sage Intacct Learning, which provides an on-demand library of training courses. It allows all your users to engage in continuous learning. So this helps to reduce costs because, and it helps in efficiencies of training as well, because your users can review these training sessions on their own time. And so you don't have a cost of a teacher showing it to you and all that kind of stuff, and taking time out in the middle of their day. They can watch things when they have downtime and whatnot. Sage Intacct Learning is a cloud solution, so you can access the learning anytime, anywhere, just like you can your Sage Intacct. And you can access the content as many times as needed. There are 2 different user types inside of Sage Intacct. There is a business user and what's called an employee user. There are other types of users too, but these are the 2 main kind. A business user is a user with unlimited access rights to all applications, and you can restrict down what users can get into by roles that you assign to your users by your administrator. An employee user is a user inside of the system that has a more limited access rights. So it's more really a read-only reporting, dashboarding type of a user. They can be part of the approval processes in the system. You have read-only access to other applications that are built on the Intacct platform. Really the only data entry that an employee user has is they're able to enter and approve employee expense reports, staff expenses, timesheets, and purchasing transactions out there, and approve payments if they're a part of the approval process. The look and feel of Sage Intacct. So this is kind of what the screen will look like. We'll get in here in a little bit. So there's a top level we talked about. We'll get into some of the menu navigation, duplicate tabs, the list views, the entry screens, how you can mark things as favorites. Dimensions. So dimensions replace your sub account in a traditional chart of accounts. Okay, and this helps to simplify your chart of accounts. And the system comes with predefined dimensions. You can also add user-defined dimensions as well to your subscription if there are additional things that you want to track that's not available in your default dimensions, the predefined ones out there. And as I mentioned before, this allows you to tag your transactions inside of Sage Intacct across all the modules. It helps to streamline your reporting. There are drop-down lists to filter and group your reports and your dashboards by dimension. These are the 10 predefined dimensions that come with the system. So you have your who's, like your customers, your vendors, your employees, your where, like your location, departments, and classes. These all come with the system. If you have the inventory module, then warehouses comes with it. If you have project costing and billing, then the projects come with it. If you have the contracts module, then the contracts dimensions comes with it as well. And as I mentioned, you can also do user-defined dimensions through an add-on subscription. Let's talk about the legacy approach to a chart of accounts, kind of the way that Sage 500 does your chart of accounts. So let's say we have a primary account. The account is 1,500 equipment. And we have 3 segments in our chart of accounts. So we have a 4-digit main account, a 3-digit location, a 3-digit department, and a 3-digit project that we want to track stuff to. Okay. So in a system like Sage 500, if you wanted to create all the possible combinations for the 1,500 account to be able to post to all these combinations of sub-accounts, you would have to create 75 different accounts out there to handle all those different combinations. Sage Intacct uses a more modern chart of accounts where all you're defining is your main or natural accounts is your chart of accounts. You then leverage off of your dimensions to tag your transactions, so you end up with the shorter, easier to manage chart of accounts, easier to kind of pick your accounts, things of that nature, because you're not looking through all those accounts out there. When you're entering transactions, and we'll see this in real time here, but you'll see how you pick an account right here. You then tag things to your dimensions right here. Okay, and then when you post these transactions, these dimensions are now posted out there for you to do your departmentalized reporting or your analysis on your department's locations, classes, things of that nature. Also, dimensions in action is dashboards here as well. You can use these dimensions inside your dashboards to start filtering your data right up here at top. You'll see I have my dimensions up here. Sage Intacct reporting options. So Sage Intacct offers a variety of report options out there with the system. There are 3 different types of reports inside of Sage Intacct. There are standard reports, and these are reports that are built into the system and pre-configured. Users cannot change these reports, but they can run the reports with slight modifications through your filtering and your sorting and your selecting of time periods and things of that nature. There are financial reports. These are run using your general ledger data. There are standard financial reports that come with Sage Intacct and are available in the Quick Start library. Users can modify and create their own reports as well using the financial report writer that we'll touch base on briefly here in the demo we're going to be getting to here shortly. And then there's also custom reports that can be created using either the custom report writer or what is called the interactive custom report writer. The custom report writer is included in the core Sage Intacct description and is a wizard-based tool that walks users through the creation of a report. The interactive custom report writer, or the ICRW they call it, this is a report writer that is an add-on application if you wanted to add it to your subscription. And it allows for some more advanced reporting capabilities for your transactional data. If the need arises for you to get into more advanced type reporting, you can add the ICRW to your subscription and write those reports. As I mentioned, it's a multi-entity environment. So you set up your entities out in the system. You have your inter-entity account mappings for your due tos, due froms that we'll see here briefly. You can restrict. So as I mentioned before, there's a top level that sits above all your entities / companies inside of Sage Intacct. And that's where you define your shared customers and your shared vendors, for instance. However, all customers and vendors might not need to be available for all your entities or all your companies. Well, inside of your setting up of your customers or your vendors, you have the ability of restricting these vendors down to certain locations or entities, departments, and whatnot. That's how you can only make certain vendors be available for certain companies, but you still have a top level where you maintain the overall list. And when you make your postings out there that are inter-entity related, you'll get the automatic inter-entity postings as a result. Workflow approvals. This is a really kind of a nice feature of Sage Intacct. So Sage Intacct offers workflow approvals built right into the system. And then what it is they're available for GL journal entries, the addition of vendors, AP bills, AP payments, purchasing transactions, expense report reimbursements, and timesheets. So you can turn on approval processes for these workflows. You can build your approval routing out there. And if you have that turned on, as you submit any transaction in a workflow that has approvals turned on, it'll go through the appropriate approval process that you set up. And we're going to see that in action here coming up. With these workflows, there's different approval types in the system that you can set up. There's value-based, manager-based, user-based, transaction type specific approval, and alternate approval functionality. So running through some of these these approval types, there's a named user, which approval requests are always routed to a specific user in that situation. You can route it to an employee manager, so a approval requests are routed to the employee's manager. So here's an example of an employee. An employee has a manager assigned to it. And if you have the approval set up accordingly, a transaction that has a particular employee on it, it'll route to that employee's manager for approval. And then there's also department approvals that you can turn on, and requests are sent to the manager of the department to which the employee submitting the transaction is assigned. So again, here's a transaction, here's a department. It goes out and says, okay, this department, who is the manager? And in this case, it would route to Emma Penny. You can do transaction location approval, where it looks at the location on the transaction and it routes accordingly. In this case, only one location can be selected per document, so you have to have the same locations on all the lines for that one to work. Transaction department approval, okay, similar to location, but if you use this one, it'll route to the, based on the department setup out here. And again, you can only have one department selected per document. And then there's transaction project manager approval. If you have the projects module turned on, it can route based on the project number here. And again, only one project can be selected per document to use this approval. There's value-based approval, where you can set up rules that says, you know, anything from $0 to $500, it goes to user X for the approval. And then once they approve it, if it's beyond their amount, it'll route to the next person the approval that might have the ability of going from 500 up to 10,000. And it keeps routing through your approval tree based on the value until it gets to an approver that has a high enough approval limit for that transaction to go through. That's more of the progressive one here. Sorry, the value-based just goes, you know, based on the amount of the bill, and it routes it to that person that has that level of approval. Where the progressive one's the one I kind of mentioned earlier, where it routes from the bottom up until the person has the ability to approve that high of a level. There's AP automation in the system available that you can turn on as part of your subscription. There's AP automation on bills. And if this is used to import bills into Sage Intacct from a template. Bills can be either uploaded or received via email. Sage AI will automatically extract the details and populate a draft bill for you for your approval. It'll correctly identify the vendor, the amounts, the dates, the line items. Okay. So this AI will learn over time as you keep bringing stuff in. It'll learn as it's doing it and gets smarter as it goes, and it makes it quicker every time you bring other ones in because it's learning from prior ones that you brought in. And we'll see that running here real time here in a little bit. There's also API automation on the payment side. This is powered by CSI, which is Sage Intacct supported. The payments are started in Intacct. CSI and the vendor determine what payment method that they want to use, and then CSI will issue the payments using the vendor's preferred payment method, which is either a check, an ACH, or a virtual card to do that. Bank reconciliation in the cash management module, you can bring in cleared transactions from a bank using a file import. There's thousands of US banks that are available out there where their standard file import will come in. And there's also bank feeds that can be turned on that have to be enabled. It's a direct connection to your bank, and it uses automated matching. When it pulls transactions into Sage Intacct, it'll match against the existing Sage Intacct bank reconciliation data using the matching rules that you set up. And if you have things inside the bank that aren't entered in Sage Intacct yet, so like a fee or interest that you earn, things of that nature, the system can automatically create the payments and or journal entries in Sage Intacct right from the bank feed to save you time from having to enter that information in. AR automation is a self-service portal that allows your customers to access invoices through a portal. It lets them see their pay history, it lets them make payments, so they can see their information and make payments out there. It's also like a collection type of a product for your internal side, where you can make notes about certain customers and invoices and keep track of the key data in your dashboard. So this left-hand side here, this is an example of the internal dashboard that your credit team would see through AR automation. And on the right-hand side here, this is an example of a website or a dashboard that your customers would see, when they would see their invoices down here at the bottom that they could pay and process things through their dashboard. So that gets us through the presentation. What we're going to do now is I want to jump into a demo of the product here now. So let me go ahead and get that moved over, get that minimized. So this is Sage Intacct and what it looks like when you kind of come in. You can have a default screen that you come to when you first log in. If you didn't want it to come to this screen, like maybe you want it to go to a dashboard or something like that, you could have that be your default landing spot when you first come into the product. We talked about the top level. So when I click on the drop down here, the top level is the level that sits above all your companies. It's not really a company. It just sits above all your companies. And you would see all your individual companies or entities underneath of there. Each of these are color coded. If you go to an individual entity, you're only seeing data for that entity. And you'll see it's color coded. It tells you you're in USA 1. Here. This is my top level. When you're at the top level, you can see data for all your entities below it. You can restrict users to certain entities. So if you don't want users to get into all the entities, when you set up your users out here, if I go to Lisa CSR, notice if I go to user entities, she's restricted to just the 100 entity. And she does not have access to the top level. So that means that when she logs in, she can only go into entity 100. She can't go to the top level. She can't go to entity 200 or entity 300. She can only go to 100. You could allow users access to the top level even though you're restricting down the entities. And all that means is they can still go to the top level, but they can only see information for the entities that they have access to. If you're working through Intacct, and let's say we're in our chart of accounts here, and I want to open up something else, but I don't want to leave this screen, I can right click on my tabs here and go duplicate. And this allows me to open up another tab that I can go into something else on and maybe I'm putting in AP bills on this tab. Okay, and then here I'm in my chart of accounts, and I could just keep right-clicking and duplicate to open up as many tabs as I want in the system. I can also undock these tabs to make them not be inside the same web browser. So if I wanted to use my Alt tab to move between, I could do that. Drop that back in there though. The way you get around in Intacct is through your menus right here. You click on your drop down, you'll see all your modules out here. You can click on them and then go to your menus underneath of there and click on a particular option and launch it accordingly. You will only see items on your menus that your user has access to based on the security and user permissions and roles that have been set up for your user. If you have something that you access on a regular basis, you can star it. So if I want to go in and look at recurring journal entries and make that be a favorite, I just hover over it and click on this star to make it go yellow. And what that does is underneath my favorites here, I will now see my recurring journal entries as well as my other things that I favorited out there. So instead of having to go down through all the menus, I can just go right to my favorites and hit the things that I hit on a regular basis from a quick access point right here. You can change the order of these menus by just clicking on it, and I'm holding the mouse button down, and I can drag and drop it to wherever I want to move it to. So if it's something I go to on a regular basis, maybe I move it more up towards the top. It has a really nice help system built into it. So I'm going to come out here and go into vendors, and I want to bring up Massachusetts Department of Revenue, and I'm going to go out here and go help on this page, and right from there it takes me to help right on this about this particular page where I can look at, okay, creating a vendor, how do I edit a vendor, duplicate a vendor. If I go to create a vendor, it talks about how do I create a vendor and goes through all the fields on that screen and explains to me what each of those fields are if I have questions about it as I'm setting up a vendor. And that's all through the system on all the screens. Whatever screen you're on, just go to help and support, help on this page, and it'll launch you into help on the topic that you're launching it from to get some good help out there. Your dimensions replace your sub-accounts we talked about. So if I go to general ledger, the way I set my dimensions up is underneath of, company setup. I can go to my cross-company dimensions right here. So I'm going to go into my departments. And this is where I set up my departments for things like sales, operations, admin, testing, research development, on down the line. So I can set these up. It's just a code, a name. You can set a manager up, whether it's active or inactive. You can have parent-child relationships, which we'll look at here on another dimension. If I go to classes, so you notice on classes, I have residential, commercial, retail, and industrial is all my parent classes. But notice that industrial is a parent, and see how there's these children locations or classes underneath of it? Because on each of these, I said that the parent was 400 industrial, okay? So if I look at 400 industrial, one thing I did on this one is I turned this one to be active, non-posting. So that means it's used for grouping purposes and reporting purposes, but individual transactions aren't posted to the 400 class in this case. It's just simply used as a roll-up for all my child classes underneath of it. So if I post any of these and I run a report and say, show me class 400, I'll see any transaction that are tagged any of these children ones underneath of it. If you don't call a dimension, like say we don't use the terminology of classes, let's say that's considered our services. I can come out here to company and go to terminology, and I can go down to class, and I can edit this, and I can say a singular class. I want it to be called a service or services. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. Oh, I got to put my language in there. Go back and edit that again. I want to say that this is, because it's multi-language as well, I'm going to say this is United States. I'm going to do it this way. Services. Okay, save it. Going through and making change in the system. If I now refresh my menus, and if I go back out to company, notice when I go to setup, that hasn't refreshed. Let me refresh this one. Company, setup. Notice how classes now is called services. So you can see how you can change the terminology just like that by using the terminology functionality. There's dashboards in the system that you can use. So if I go to dashboards, and then I'm going to go, there are general dashboards, which means they're more general in nature, not tied to a specific type of user. So I'll go into dimensional insights. And I have my date at 12/31/2018. I can change this date to whatever I want, but I'm going to leave it at 12/31/2018 because that's where the majority of the data for Intacct is sitting out there. Notice all these are called scorecards, and these are reports, and I can drop in different items on the dashboard here. I can edit each of these by going to this little sprocket right here, the little gear, and takes me into the setup of that, and I can go in and change how I want that to look. Okay. Up arrow green, down arrow red, things of that nature. So these are all up arrow greens because we're up over the month to date compared to the prior month. So we're up 54% on revenue surveillance. Total revenue is up 83.12% over prior month. I can drill down on any of these by clicking on them, and it'll take me to all the accounts that are underneath of there. I can drill down even further and say, of this $941,800, I can drill down on it, and I can see all the individual transactions that make up that dollar amount. And I can drill down even further to look at the entire transaction that it came from, all right from drilling down from my dashboards. I ended up down to a journal entry out here that got posted through a sales invoice. And I can even click on that and go down and look at the individual invoices that were a part of that posting. So all right from your dashboards, I'm just drilling down to get the underlying data. You can filter these. So if I just want to look at these numbers for the 100 department, I can pick that and say apply, and you'll see these numbers will recalculate based on that department. I can even put a class in, or in this case, we called it service. Let's say I just want to look at residential sales for the sales location, or the sales department, and apply that, and you'll see these numbers all filtering accordingly. There are also role-based dashboards that you can create. So here's one that's intended for like a CFO, more high level. So you'll see your company performance right here at top. I can drill down. So this is my revenue, my cost of goods sold, my operating expenses, and my net income or loss by period for the prior 12 periods. I can click on any of these to drill down to underlying data, just like we saw, and keep drilling down like on the example I just did before. So I have the ability of drilling down on any of these things to kind of get to underlying data and then drilling down further from there. Entities. These are your companies inside of Sage Intacct. So if I go into company, if I go into setup, and I go into entities, this is where you define your companies or your entities. And I'll look at 100 here. So you'll see entity 100, you give it a name, a federal ID, you give it a color code for it. You're just setting up to make that company be available. What's the first fiscal month? What's the first tax month? All that information out there. So that's where you set your entities or your companies up. You then set up your inter-entity account mappings using this option right here. And this is where you set up your due tos and your due froms for each of your entities. Okay, so for entity A to entity B. So here's the relationship between 100 and 200, and here's the enter into the receivable and payable for 100, and on down the line for for 200. So it's all kind of set up out there for you. Well, you got to set it up, but it uses that in the transactions you'll see here in a little bit. Let's talk about general ledger and go into our accounts, and let's look at our accounts here for a minute. This is a list view. So this is where you see your data in a list, where in 500, you're clicking on a magnifying glass for that to come up. In here, in Sage Intacct, your list views are just listed right here. You can scroll through them by using your numbers right here. You can control how many you want to show up on a list view. So this one has 40 showing up by default. That's why it says 1 of 40. By user, you can come into your preferences and you can set that the number that you want to see in your list views right here. So records per page on a list screen, maybe I want to see 50. So I'll change that to 50 and say save. Okay, now when I go to general ledger accounts, my list views change. Now I'm seeing 1 through 50, and it's loading 10 more of my initial list for me because of how I set that up. If you're looking for something, you can just type it into the appropriate columns up here. You can maintain these views. If you have other data that you want to see in your list view that's not out there by default, you can create a new list view and start picking other columns you want to see, and it walks you through 5 steps of creating a new view. I'm not going to create one right now, but I have other ones out here. On my drop down, I could then pick my test 2, or there's one out here for GS category. So there's different things that you can create these views out here. If you're looking for something and you don't know what it is, like you don't know the account number, you're not sure what the exact title is, but you know it has the word expense in it, that's where you do the percent sign, and then you pick the word you're searching on. So if I do percent expense and hit enter, it now filters my accounts for me anywhere where inside the title the word expense shows up. Okay, so that's how I can get into finding my data out there. If I'm looking for rent, I could do like asterisk rent. Okay, and I'm going to go into my rent expense account here. This is where you set up your account. You tell it what type of account it is. Is it a normal balance, a debit or a credit, all this kind of stuff. What dimensions are required for this account. So what this is saying, if you use this account, it'll force you to pick a department, a location, and a service. Okay, so you don't have to have that on all your accounts, but that's how you can verify, even though you don't have a full fleshed out chart of accounts, that's how you can require people to have to pick dimensions and make sure you get the data you need for your reporting. This is not standard out of the box in Intacct, but you can turn on filtering at the bottom of your accounts, other places in the system as well that we'll see. But what I'm saying is for this rent account, the only departments that can be posted to for this account are these in this list right here. And we're going to see this come into play here in a little bit. You have the ability of doing statistical accounts if you would like to. You're tracking things outside the system like number of employees, different things of that nature. Okay, I had some clients in the past that tracked things like in the healthcare industry that were tracking like patient days, number of beds, things of that nature. You can create these statistical accounts. You can make journal entries to them using statistical journal entries right here, and it's not affecting your live GL data where it's showing up on your balance sheets and things of that nature, your income statements, but it's showing that you can use those in those reports to see like maybe total expenses by number of employees or something like that. We talked about the dimension restrictions underneath of the account. where I showed you how you could filter out by department on the bottom by an account. You can also do that in the dimension as well. So if I go back out to company and go back out to my departments, and if I go into like 100 department here, because I turned that on, I also can set restrictions by account through the department as well. And it doesn't matter which screen I put them on, it'll show up in both places. I can do restrictions on customers and vendors and all that good stuff. And again, just like on the account, this isn't standard out of the box Intacct, but can be turned on as part of your subscription. It's all available out there to be turned on, but you have to pick and choose which ones you want to turn it on for. There are budgets available in the system. So general ledger, I'm going to go into budget repository here, and I'm going to pick my current year budget, for instance. Oops, hold on a second. I want to select the budget detail of that, not to edit it. That was creating the actual budget. So this is where you put the details behind it, and I can go out here and I can edit this. And this is where you start putting in by month what your budgeted numbers are. Okay, so that's all built right in as well. Let's look at it. Let's make a journal entry, and I'll show you how some of the multi-company works. So I'm going to go to General Ledger. I'm going to go to Journal Entries. And I'm going to go down to the payroll journal entry, and I'm going to view transactions. And I'm going to add a transaction. Today's date's fine. I'm going to give it a description of payroll journal entry, for instance. Let's say you're doing your payroll outside the system, like through ADP or Paycor, Paychex, or any of those out there. You're going to get a file from them of what your journal entry is. If you enter that in, you can also attach the file you get from them. So over here on my other screen, I have a journal entry PDF that I'm going to just drag and drop out here. And that attaches that document to this transaction. And it's going to flow with the transaction all the way through to history. Let's make our journal entry now. So I'm going to pick a cost of goods sold billable account, and I'm going to have it go to the 100 location, and I'm going to have it go to the sales department, and I'm going to have it go to the residential service. Projects is another dimension out here we talked about. Let's say we're not using projects, for instance. I can see other dimensions out here on this drop down. But if I want projects to not be on the main tab, but be down here just in case I'm going to select something on it, I can edit that layout by going up to help and support. Go to more actions, edit entries layout. I can grab projects and drag and drop it down to the second tab down here. Okay, so I drop projects down there. I saved my layout. And notice now projects no longer shows up here because it's not one I stop on a regular basis, but it's still available down here in my other details. Okay, so I can do that. Let me finish putting this journal entry in here. I've just got a couple lines I want to hit. I want to put a source entity on here. Is going to be 100 because that's the source of where this is going to come from. This is what drives my intercompany right here. So I'm going to pick that. It's going to go to my 200 operations. It's going to go to the 200 commercial service. And then it's going to come out of cache of the 100 location here. And it's, I want my amounts to be, I meant to put these in before, $1,000, $1,500. And you'll notice that this is going to be $2,500. Okay. So I have that out there. I'm going to go ahead and post this now. So this is an example of real-time posting of your data where you don't have batches. So in Sage 500, there's a save button that you select that puts it out into a batch that you then have to run a journal or a register to look at and prove, and then nothing hits the live data until you actually update that journal. Well, here I say post, and it's hitting my live data real time. And once it's post, I'll show you how we can look at some things here. So I'm going to go back and look at this transaction. I'm going to go, and here is the entry I made, right? But look at the inner entity that happened for me. Due to entity 100, $1,500. Due from entity 100, $1,500. So it did the appropriate due from for me because I said my source entity was 100. So when I picked a location or a company or an entity that wasn't in that part of that company, it creates the due tos and due froms. So you'll see all that happen for me automatically out there. I have the ability of drilling down. Like I said, it puts that attachment out there. Let's look at actually out there posting. So I'm going to go to General Ledger. I'm going to go to my General Ledger report. I'm going to pick today's date. I can put filters and whatnot on these reports, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to, view this report the way it is. And you'll notice here on 5/18 and here's one on 5/19, the one I just did, $2,500. There's a transaction that happened. It went to location 100. I have the ability of right here drilling down and seeing the transaction, seeing the inner entity. I see it all right through there. Okay, and I can drill down like we talked about before on the attachment. So you'll see right away when you say post, your data goes out to your general ledger right then. You also have the ability to import in journal entries. So let's say you have some big journal entries that you're making and you don't want to have to go through and manually enter every single line out there. So I can import in journal entries. So I'm going to go back to journal entries and I'm going to say import transactions here. And I'm going to browse to a file I have out here. So I have an insurance expense journal entry import that I created. And I'll show you what that file looks like here real quick. So here's the template that it uses. So I have my journal entry right here, my data filled in with the debits, the credits, the appropriate locations and departments, the dates, the source journals, all that kind of stuff filled in, what entities it's hitting. Okay, so I have that. Now I'm going to select that file and I'm going to say import. It's going to go through the import process. Assuming it's successful, I get this that I successfully imported in the journal entries. If there are errors, it will tell me there's an error and I can click on a link to download the error file and I will also get an email describing to me what the errors were. But I had no errors, so I'm going to say done here. I'm going to now go down to my GJ journal because that's the journal that was used in this import. And I'm going to view transactions. And here is on today's date, 5/19 of 25, expense of prepaid insurance. And I'm going to go out here and edit this. And there's the import that I just did. So you'll see it right there. That's the transaction we just looked at and it made the entry for me out there. Okay. So that's how you can import in data or import in journal entries. If it's a journal entry you do on a regular basis, you can set it up as a recurring journal entry. Okay. So if I go out here and look at my prepaid insurance recurring journal entry, you give it the entry that it's going to make. You set up your schedule and your schedule is when it's going to happen. And everything happens for you automatically once you schedule it. And scheduled jobs will run shortly after midnight in the time zone of what your company is set up to be in based on the schedule you set up out here. So if we say it's monthly and you do it on the 14th or, for instance, it'll do it on the 14th of every month right after midnight when it turns to 14th based on that schedule you set up. Okay, so you have your schedule you can set up here. Let's talk about the financial report writer here briefly. So I'm going to go into General Ledger. I'm going to go into Financial Reports. And I'm going to edit the profit and loss actual versus budget. So this is the financial report writer. So I could go into my rows and I can define all the rows that are going to be on my reports. I can look at the details of what's on each of those rows, for instance. Okay, all the groups that are maintained underneath of that row. I can look at my columns to see all the columns that are going to be on the report. And I can add these actual versus budget, differences, variances, all that kind of stuff. I can use my dimensions and just say, use this dimension and create a column for every value that's in that dimension. That's how you can quickly get a departmentalized report with each department listed in its own column. And you could get that from one column of actual data if you put in a dimension structure right there to do it. Okay. But I want to leave it like this, and I'm going to preview this and say, go out to HTML. And I'm going to go to my general and admin expenses, and I'm going to drill down on the actual numbers here. And you'll see right from here, I can drill right down and see all the accounts that are underneath of this, and then what postings went to each of those accounts. Okay. And then from here, I can drill down on the dollar amount and actually look at the actual transaction out there, just like I could from dashboards and like I could from reports. I can just keep drilling down and drilling down out there. I have the ability of not only going to HTML, I could export this out to Excel as well, and that would dump it out to an Excel spreadsheet for me in a nice format that columns all match up and everything. Your coloring, if you put any coloring out there based on positive, negative, red, green, all that kind of comes over as well as part of your export. Accounts payable. Let's spend a little bit of time on accounts payable here. So I'm going to go into vendors, and I'm going to bring up a vendor here. I'm going to bring up RWS commercial. So on a vendor, you have things that you set up on the vendor tab. This is where you can set up all your address and your constant data like phone numbers and things of that nature. On the additional information tab, this is where you can set up if you have any attachments to attach to this vendor. So maybe like a purchase agreement or a rental agreement or something like that. So I'm going to go out here and I have a rental agreement for RWS. I'm going to drag and drop that on here and put that as part of this vendor. So I attach that attachment. So that'll just go along for the ride with that vendor now. This is where you can put a vendor on hold. This is where you can define the default expense account for this vendor if you're putting in an AP bill. On the contact list, this is where you set up all your contacts for your vendor. Payment information, this is where you choose your default payment method. Is it check, ACH? Is it cash? You set up your terms codes. If your vendor refers to you as a certain number, you can set that you can set up what your number is out there for that vendor, and it'll print on your check, so it makes it easier for them when they go to apply your payments. Bank files, if this is an ACH vendor, you would have your ACH information out here. So you select to enable ACH and you set that all up out here. So I'll go ahead and save that. Let's put an AP bill in now. So I'm going to go into accounts payable, bills, and I'm going to go ahead and say add. Today's date's fine, and I'm going to pick ABC Supply Company. Okay. I have an attachment that I want to put, just like we saw before. I could drag and drop it here if I wanted to. And I'm going to go out here and I'm going to notice my account defaulted. It defaulted because that was set up as a default GL account for the ABC Supply vendor. So I'm going to say this is for $500 and it's going to location 100. And look, when I click on my department drop down, you see how I see 500, 550, and 575. I'm going to pick 550, okay? And I want to say it's the residential service, and I want to go to my next line, and I want to change this account to my 6510 account, trade shows and exhibits, and it's $250, and this is going to location 110. Watch when I click on my drop down now on departments. Notice that 550 and 575 do not show up. That gets back into my departmentalized in my chart of accounts filtering we talked about before, where you get into these accounts and you can start putting filtering down here. And notice this account cannot use the 550, 575 departments, so they don't show up for data entry here. Just wanted to show you how that filtering works there. All right, I want to pick this to 300 though. And we're going to go to the class of commercial. And I'm going to go ahead and say post. And again, just like we saw on the GL side, when you say post, it automatically posts that transaction out there. All right. You have the ability, if I'm adding a bill, as soon as you pick a vendor, you can say populate from last bill, and it will look at the last bill for this vendor, and it'll populate that information right here for you if you're putting in a similar bill from last time, and then you can add it accordingly. But I want to cancel that. There's some AP automation that you can do as well. I can take a PDF and I can upload that, and it'll read the PDF and create an invoice for me. So I'm going to go up here and say upload, and it's for location 100, and I'm going to drag and drop. This is an example of a PDF right here. Office Depot. It's got $300 here. It's got, the address, the dates, July 4th, 2018, all this good stuff. So I'm going to grab this and drag and drop that in here. And I'm going to say create bills. Okay, and I'm going to refresh my screen. What it's doing at this point in time is going to go to a status of analyzing, and it is reviewing that PDF, reading it, trying to pull pieces out of it to basically create this bill for you automatically from that PDF. Okay. The system will learn over time as you manually fill in missing data that it might not have put out there the first time. As you fill in the blank missing data, the next time you import that bill in, and you might have to put it in again, but eventually it'll learn that and it'll continue to use that going forward. The bill will be attached to it. You can set this up to basically be a drag and drop like we just saw, or you can set it up to monitor a directory automatically, and anytime a PDF shows up in that directory, it will try and create that bill as it monitors that directory. Let's refresh this, see if it's done analyzing. It's still analyzing. So we'll come back and look at that here in a minute. Let's move on for a minute to recurring bills. So I'm going to go into general ledger, accounts payable, recurring bills. Just like we have recurring journal entries, I have the ability of doing recurring AP bills. So if you have a bill that's repetitive in nature, like a rent expense or something along the lines of that, you can set that up. So here's my rent. I can tell it what vendor it's for, set all this good stuff up here. I go to my schedule just like recurring journal entries, and I set my schedule up. Once I set my schedule up and save it, then it schedules that job, and then when it's time for that recurring invoice to happen, it'll do it just like on the recurring journal entries. It'll do it just past midnight on the time zone that your company's in. It'll create those recurring invoices and turn them into actual bills for you. Okay. Let me go back here and see if it finished that yet. We'll get wrapped up here in a second. Here I got a couple more things. So it's still saying analyzing, so we'll try and revisit that here again later. Create bill. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can do an ACH payment real quick. So I'm going to go out here to a vendor and show you an ACH vendor here for a minute. And I'm going to pick Massachusetts Department of Revenue. And I'm going to go to the bank file tab. And you're going to see this vendor is set up for ACH payments. And here's their ACH information right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new bill for this vendor. So I'm going to go out here and I'm going to add a bill. I'm going to pick that vendor, and I can search by number, by name, by whatever here. And it's going to be $2,000. It's going to go to the 100 location. It's going to go to the 300 department. And not requiring a service, I'm going to go ahead and just post this. And it posted it. Okay. Now, let's say I want to create an ACH payment off of that. Here's the invoice. I can go into this invoice. From here, I can click on the pay button. I can say my payment method is ACH or bank file. I'll see all the invoices that are out there available to be paid for this vendor. I'm going to pick that invoice that I just did a little bit ago, and I'm going to select to pay now. And it says one payment was successful. It's now out there ready to be paid. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, it's been selected, you'll see here right now. I'm going to go out here to accounts payable. I'm going to go to payments. I'm going to go to payment file, and I'm going to say ACH file generation. And I'm going to select that ACH batch that I just kind of created. And I'm going to select generate file. And it takes me to this screen right here. And I can click on the details underneath of the file description to see information about this. What payment ID is out there, see any payments that are inside of this. Okay. So I have the ability to look at all that. Let me go ahead and go back out of here. Okay. From here, I'm going to go ahead and say download. This again downloads that file for me. I would then upload that file. This is going to download the ACH Notcha file for me that I would then process up to my bank using the banking software, or however have you set to get this information to your bank. But this is your payment that's going to be made. Okay. Once it's successful and you know you've uploaded it to the bank, you then need to confirm it to flag that ACH batch was good. Okay. I have the ability of sending out remittance advices as well. So I could come out here and say print payment copies. And I'm going to say that it's ACH or a payment method is ACH. I'm going to click my view button. It'll show me all the ones that I've done an ACH for out there. I could pick the ones that are out here in this batch on 5/19. I can say email. And I can say print or email. And it says a payment notification will be sent to the specified email addresses. So when that email comes in here in a minute, I'll show you what that looks like. So it's basically creating that email for me out there. All right, moving on here. Let's talk about the last thing I want to talk about. We'll wrap up here. I know we're running a little bit late, but we'll wrap up. Is I want to talk about purchase orders. That just popped in. So let me show you this. So here is an example of the remittance advice email that would come. It would say, "Hi, Massachusetts Department of Revenue. A payment of $100 was issued to you by ACH." And here is the PDF that it creates by default to send to them of what the details are of that ACH payment that you sent. Okay, just wanted to show that to you. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about approvals. So as I mentioned, approvals, workflow approvals are available in a number of different spots in the system. And where I'm going to show you where they work at is doing it through a purchase order requisition. You could have it on AP bills, as I mentioned. Those are kind of the two most common that you would run into, maybe journal entries. But I'm going to go in here and I have approval turned on for purchasing. So I'm going to come out to purchasing. I'm going to go to all. I'm going to go to quote, and I'm going to say purchase requisition. And I'm going to add a PO requisition. Okay, today's date's fine. This is going to be for the ABC Supply Company. And I have a requisition form that I want to attach. So PO rec form, I can drag and drop that inside of there. And just like we saw other places where attachments are available, that puts that attachment on that document and it'll stay with it. And then I want to go ahead and down to my entries and say this is for my office supplies miscellaneous item here. It's going to go into the 100 location. It's going to go into the 300 department. And it's going to go into the 300 service. And it's a quantity of 1 and it's for $500, we're going to say. Okay. Now, notice that this is not a post button, it is a submit button. Same thing would happen if I had approvals turned on in AP bills, the post button would have changed to a button called submit. So I'm going to submit this. And you're going to notice that I have a requisition out here now, and it's got a status of submitted. And it's now routing through the approval process. If I go back and look at that requisition, and if I go to my history, you'll see it's going through this transaction definition, and I can look at my definition out here and see all that information. Where that's routing to, though, is I have another user. I'm going to drag another Intacct over here. Notice on this one, I'm logged in as Joe Gupser. But on this one, I'm logged in as a user called John Approver. John is an employee user, not a business user, and he's part of the approval process for purchase order requisitions. I got an email. So John, approver, would have got an email saying, "Hi, John, the following purchasing transaction requires your approval." And it gives you all the information right here. If they're not currently logged in, they could click on this, display the list of transactions to approve right here. But John's already logged in. And there's a couple different ways where he can see these approvals. I can make it be a widget on a dashboard. So if I'm inside of dashboards here, and I'm going to go to all, role-based, and I'm going to go to controller. And notice on the right-hand side, I have my approval set up here. So here's AP bills waiting for my approval. Here's any purchasing transactions waiting for my approval, expense reports, timesheets. So I can make that be a widget on a dashboard. I can click on the magnifying glass here to look at what transactions are required to be approved for purchasing, for instance. That's one way I can get to it. Or I could also go through purchasing, go to all, and go to approved transactions and see it that way as well. So I can go in as an approver. I can view the transaction. Notice I can't really change anything, but I can look at it, see if it all makes sense or not. If it has attachments, I can drill down on it to look at the attachment or any attachments, because you could have more than one if need be. I can either approve it or I can decline it. If I decline it, I can give a reason why, and it routes it back to the person that put the requisition in, and it tells them why I declined it. They have to make the appropriate changes and resubmit it. The whole process starts again. Let's say I'm saying this is good to go. I'm going to say approve, and I'm going to say this is approved. And I'm going to go ahead and say approve. And it's going to approve it. Notice it drops it off of John Approver's screen of transactions that need to be approved. I'm going to move that back over. I'm in here as the Joe Gupser user now. And you see how this still says submitted, but let me refresh that. And it now has a status of pending. So it's telling me that that transaction got approved. If I go in and view that and go to my history, you're going to see that it was approved by John. Okay. All right. Then I'm going to go. Now I can just finish my process through, and I'll just jump through the rest of this quickly. I can now convert this requisition into a purchase order. So it's now a PO out there. The attachment comes along for the ride. It's all good to go. I'm going to go ahead and post that. That is now a purchase order. Okay, so now if I go out to purchasing order, purchase order, here's the one I just approved, or not approved, converted from a requisition. I could print or email that. So if I want to print it and look at it, it's going to look like this by default out of the box. Okay, and this is a template that can be modified. I can then keep going on down through there, and I could say purchasing in order, purchase order, and I can convert this once the invoice shows up. The goods have showed up, so I could, if it's a actual inventory item, I would do a receive goods type deal. Since this isn't a purchase order with inventory, I go right to my vendor invoice when the invoice shows up and the goods show up, and I could post that, and that creates an AP vendor invoice out there. Okay. Um, so I want to go back to when I was doing my order before, and I was looking at this order, and I showed how you could do the printing of that order. You could also email that as well and say who it's from, and you could have this all set up, and that would go through and email just like it did kind of with the remittance devices before, but it would look something similar to um, those where it just says, hey, this here's a purchase order from company ABC. You can email it out to your vendors that way. So that's all available in the system. Um, and then at the end of the thing, now that I have this vendor invoice, I can look at this vendor invoice and I could go to it and I can look at the history of it. And it's going to show me how it went through a purchase requisition. It was converted. It then became a purchase order. It was converted. And then it became a vendor invoice. All like I can see all the history out here and who did it and when they did it. And click on any of these links to look at additional data out there. So I know we went a little bit long, but that is the items that I wanted to kind of cover today. So I want to thank you guys for attending. I don't know if we had any questions that were submitted while we were going through any of that.
Yeah, Joe. So, two questions here.
Okay.
So the one is about just 500 in general. Is 500 going to get discontinued?
There is no Sage software has not said they're discontinuing Sage 500. It's still a valid product, still a lot of companies using it on a day-to-day basis. So no, it is not being discontinued as of right now. But as we mentioned in some of the stuff up front, it's not a product that's being heavily developed and added to, like Sage Intacct is, for instance. And a lot of that's just based on its older technology to legacy systems. So some of the technology it's written on is kind of becoming expired. So they're only doing like maintenance releases to that at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
No, it's not going to it's not like you're going to, hey, this is going to shut down on you tomorrow or anything like that. No, it's still a viable product that's still running. So,
Second question, what is a typical Intacct implementation timeframe?
that's a good question. And that really depends on a lot of different things. It'll depend on anything from how many entities or companies we would be migrating over. It would be based on the modules that company is running. So if it was a company that was doing some sales order purchasing and some light inventory type stuff or some inventory, it's going to be on a little bit longer. If it was just like general ledger, accounts payable, accounts receivable, will be on the shorter end. But anywhere from like 3 to 6 months, typically 4 to 6 months. And again, it just depends on a lot of factors, both time of the client plus the modules and all that kind of stuff. So that's typical range, 4 to 6, 4 to 7 months, something like that.
All right, thank you, Joe. That's what we had. So I think
All right.
that wraps us up here.
All right. Thanks, Brett. And again, thanks everybody for attending. Here's, again, their email addresses for myself and Brett, and then our generic Cincinnati@martinandassociates.com email address as well. If you have any additional questions or want to see anything else, just reach out to us and let us know. Thanks again for attending the webinar today and hope to talk to you soon. Bye.